Okay, so I don't even know how to start these videos, but today I'm here to do like a little series that I had started way back in like 2 years ago, I want to say now, where I've been interviewing my friends who currently do not work in publishing, who at some point worked in publishing. So today I'm here with Eamon, who I'm gonna let introduce herself. But Eamon and I have been friends for 6 years.
Oh, 7.
Yeah, since I first started the industry, basically. But Eamon, do you want to tell them a little bit about yourself?
So I'm Eamon. I currently do not work in publishing full-time, but I'm still a freelance book editor. I'm writing my first novel, and my day job is editing recipes. But I've previously worked at a literary agency, doing admin and talent acquisition work, editorial development work at an agency. I did several internships at book publishing companies.
Which is how we met.
Yeah, we met as interns. And I worked as an acquiring editor at a book publishing company, and then did a lot of freelance work, developmental work for a variety of publishers. And then I moved to the space of just doing exclusively editing freelance books for authors who are racialized and marginalized.
What was your first job / internship in publishing? Like, did you always want to work in publishing?
Okay.
Did you go to school? Like, those basics.
So we got to go way back. I always loved reading, and I've always been like an introvert, someone who doesn't really know how to express themselves always. That's kind of who I was growing up, and I loved reading. And then my parents were like, reading is not a full-time job, so you gotta you gotta go and like go to school and do something real. So I went to journalism school where I wrote and read, and as part of like the final stage of being part of the program, you got to do an internship. So I did an internship at Hazlitt magazine, which is a magazine that is part of Penguin Random House, and I worked in their offices and did that internship, and spoke to editors, spoke to writers who were coming in, interviewed some writers for the magazine. And so I like loved the space of working with writers and creatives, of doing developmental work, of looking at stories by marginalized people in particular closely, and trying to find ways to get those stories out in the world. And so yeah, that's kind of where it started. And then I went, did a course publishing. Someone told me, you got to do the publishing certificate to get an internship at a publisher.
But you technically already had.
I had a degree
kind of
in editing, and writing.
Yeah.
Anyways, I went back to school and I did one course. I didn't do the whole the certificate because I couldn't afford it. And after I did the one course, I was like, this is pointless. This is useless. Why am I paying for this? Other than meeting Hannah and Marina, there was like no point. And then from there, I did 3 publishing internships. And then I got my job at the literary agency.
Yeah, it was Doubleday,
M&S. What was the third one? M&S?
Hazlitt was the third one.
Okay.
Yeah, because I did the Doubleday internship after Eamon finished it. So that's how we met. She was at M&S, and then I was doing DDC.
Yeah.
We sat across from each other in the pod.
Yeah, and one day we went shopping at Uniqlo.
On our lunch break. I miss those days.
I think that was when like we really hit it off, because we went to Uniqlo and we were looking at things, and I kept making stuff up, and you kept saying, why would you want to buy this? And I was like, because it's cute. And she's like, no.
It actually was not. So you said you got into the literary agenting area. What was a day-to-day, like what was your roles like in that? What were your tasks that you were responsible for?
So when I started, it was a lot of like admin work. So just like reading slush submissions, which are like submissions by people who don't really have a large portfolio, aren't referrals. So I read a lot of slush. I scheduled a lot of meetings. I organized a lot of paperwork. Yes. Paperwork. In like 2019, there was still paperwork. And then I started doing more talent acquisition work, so finding really cool authors, talking to them about their work, helping them develop their work, helping the agents sign their work, and looking closely at like development within the framework of domestic literary agencies. That was, I think, really where I got clarity on what my talents are, because at an agency you could like do the marketing vein, which part of my job was marketing. You could do the finance stuff, which part of my job was finance. You could do like the networking thing, which I didn't like at all. And then the part of the job that the only part of the job that I really liked was the actual reading manuscripts and proposals and helping authors flesh those out and putting together a package to submit to a publisher. And so I think it was just like the actual client care and editorial piece that I really enjoyed. So that brought a lot of clarity. And out of that opportunity, I kind of developed editorial skills that allowed me to acquire at HarperCollins, where I was acquiring a list exclusively of work by authors who are racialized and marginalized. And even in that space, I got to like reform how I look at acquisitions and how I acquire work and how I talk about them at Pubboard, which should I provide context?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, can you walk through like sort of the acquisition process? Because I feel like a lot of people don't know what the actual behind the scenes are of how hard it is to get a book. As an editor. So basically, when you're an editor, what happens is you usually get submissions from agents or referrals from other authors who are published by the publisher. Sometimes authors will reach out to you on social media, because I do have like a social media platform and I'm like pretty social. So basically, you get projects like that, depending on if it's fiction or nonfiction. For fiction, you get the full novel. For nonfiction, you get a proposal and some sample chapters. You read the work, you get like, I don't know, I think for each editor, it's a different amount of submissions every week. If you're more established as an editor, you probably get like a dozen a week or something. And you would get like your editorial assistants to help.
Exactly. And you would get your editorial assistant to be like, can you read this? And whichever one is good, let me know. That's realistically what most established editors do. But for me, it was a lot of like, because I was new to acquiring, because I was new to editing in that framework, because I didn't have much mentorship or guidance within those spaces, I kind of had to figure it out myself. So most of the work I acquired was a result of connections I had before I went in. Most of the work I acquired was not agented. It was like me having conversations with people that led to me getting that work. The work that I acquired really, really stood out to me, not only because of the quality of the writing, but also what was missing in those spaces and what it provided in terms of like not only diversity of voice, but just like good books by people of color.
Because some like the perspectives are so different that it makes the stories more interesting sometimes than a lot of other stuff that you see.
Exactly. All of these books were like radically different from each other in tone, in intention, in voice, in every way, which was really exciting to me. I read them, I really liked them, I saw a lot of potential, and then you put together kind of like a mini pitch of why you think it's so good, and you go to your manager, who is usually the editorial director, and you talk to them about how much you think the book means to you and will mean to the publisher, and then you set up a meeting with the agent, if there's an agent. If there's not an agent, you set up a meeting with the author to get more information, to get more insights, to hear them talk about the framing of the book a little bit more, and then you go back to your boss and say, okay, more information, this is really exciting. And once they are on board, then you send kind of like a memo with all the details about the book to everyone who is part of Pubboard meetings, which is usually someone from sales, someone from marketing. All of the editorial team kind of pitch the book and then have conversations about why it's viable, why it's not. You talk about comps, which I think that's a different video, but it's basically titles that exist within that genre that are somehow related, that have done well. And so you try to frame the book in a way that mirrors those things, and it's really
it's not just like the stuff within the book itself. It's also like sales is an important part of comps. Like that's what we primarily use them for in-house, is like how are we're gonna comp it for this book like marketing wise, and then this book like sales wise it should be in these channels. So that's what we primarily mean.
It goes to Pubboard, and then the sales marketing team and editorial team decide whether or not we should request a P&L, which is a profit and loss statement. You're hitting a certain return of investment that's required for you to put an offer in, then you can make an offer to the author. If it doesn't hit it, then you can't make an offer. You're like, have no option no matter how much you love the book. And then an offer letter is different for each editor, but for me it was basically like a really personal long note about what the characters meant, what the book meant. Basically a love letter. I call it a love letter. Every editor has a different way of doing that. And then you send that off with all the financials of like, this is how much we're paying, this is the breakdown of payment. And then if there's an agent, the agent will look at it, take it to the author, discuss it, come back to you, either accepting, asking questions, or rejecting the offer if they have other offers on the table. Then it's an auction situation. So you all make a bid and then they're rounds. It's basically what you would imagine an auction to be. If you get the book, it's everyone celebrates, and then you start the actual work of developing the book, having conversations with the author.
How long does it take between acquisition and actually seeing like the finished book on the shelves?
18 months at least. And I was an editor for a year.
So
I did a lot of editorial work, but I didn't see a lot of the books through to the end.
Sure. You want to shout out any of the books that may or may not be out currently?
Oh god, okay, Bad Cree by Jessica Johns just came out in January. It's incredible. You should read that. Next spring, Saadi Muqtadar's debut novel, The Land of No Regrets, is coming out. It's about 4 young men in an Islamic school in Ajax and their friendship and also sexuality and identity and faith, and it's an incredible novel.
So I think one of the questions people are going to probably have is like, what made a book stand out to you and make you want to acquire it?
So I think like everyone has different tastes as a reader so I lean towards more literary work, or work that sits between literary and commercial. That's like the space, my happy space. So I would say for me it's comes down entirely to voice. So I need to feel really connected to the characters, or like I really need to dislike them. And I need to spend the whole book figuring out why.
Okay.
And creating a list. So those are kind of the places I go to, but honestly, if you look at the books that I have acquired or the ones that I edit freelance now, they're like not all based in issues. So they're all by racialized authors, but not based in issues. They're based in experiences. And they center a lot of community and joy and just like expressing ways of existing as people of color, instead of being like, this is a book about racism. And here is us unpacking it. Like all the books are very intentionally about and for people of color. So even if they're exploring challenging experiences or struggles or whatever they're exploring, the intention is very clear. So for me, that is the most important thing.
You clearly, like, just hearing you talk, you obviously love books and you love editing, but you're not in publishing anymore.
Yes.
So can we discuss what the problems were with the industry, with editorial specifically? Because I can think like that department's so different from other departments. So if you could talk about like why, wow, Eamon's so popular that she's gonna pick you.
I'm sorry.
So like what caused you to like leave the industry basically, and like the problems that you had?
Okay, so there are a lot. Like we could do a series on this, but I'm gonna try to be succinct as an editor. I think the central issue for me personally was that editorial is a very historically and currently white space with very specific ways of doing things, from acquisition, from talking about books, from editing books, from selling books. It's like the intention is very rooted in ideologies and practices that I fundamentally think are oppressive. Are conversations in spaces that leave out people of color very intentionally, and when it lets them in, it's like water yourself down, become who we need you to be. I'm like a very blunt person. I don't take shit. I don't put up with shit. I don't put up with racism. And I'm like very clearly exist as someone who is here to serve community, and I can't disassociate with that part of myself. And that can be very challenging in spaces like these, because these jobs are few and far between. They're very competitive. People who come into them never leave them until they're forced to, and like it's a rare opportunity to be an acquiring editor. And so in these spaces, they're oftentimes looking for a yes man, someone who's gonna be like, yeah, cool, and who'll go along with things, and I don't do that. I like am a very curious person. I stir shit up, I ask questions, and I want to do things in different ways, because the world is and fundamentally should always be changing, right? Where like as humans we exist and should exist in evolution. And so for me, it's just like these spaces were too traditional. It was very challenging. There was a lot of microaggressions. There was a lot of like micromanagement. There's a lot of like people telling you how to do things and not being open to you talking about other ways of doing things. So anywho, I really struggled with a lot of that, and for me it boiled down to like I need to be in a more positive mental framework, because it took a toll on me. And so I was like, I'm gonna do freelance. And then, as we all know, freelance is not sustainable. Like, you know, when you have bills to pay, when you're an independent adult, you can't depend on a smattering of income. You need to have a solid income. So I found a job outside of publishing where I can use my skills, where there are no microaggressions, there's no tone policing. It's very like, do your job, go home, nobody gives a fuck, and you work 9 to 5 and nobody's gonna message you outside of those hours. Yeah. When I was an intern, would come in for 8 o'clock and I would leave around 7. Yeah. Because I had so much shit to do. Then I would read on the train home. Then I would go home, cook, clean for my family. Then I would read again all night long. And then I would be in the office again for 8. And it was basically an unpaid internship. Like, it was barely paid.
Yeah, it's like $100 a week or something, I think.
Yeah, and my dad was paying for my commute there.
Yeah, because the commute costs more. Yeah.
It didn't even cover it because I used to come from Mississauga. And so my dad had a running tally. So my dad loaned me the money to do the internships, which I then had to pay back. And my first publishing job, I made $23,000 a year. Yeah. And when I left that job, I was in that job for a while, I still didn't make $30K.
Just literary agencies, man.
Like, yeah, and so my dad had loaned me the money. So I had the privilege to have a father who was like, you want to do this? I'm going to make it happen for you. A lot of people don't have that.
Yeah, especially, and then like being near enough to the city that you could commute in as well is another thing, because back then we had to be in the offices every day. We didn't get the option of
commuting in to read. Like, to me, it was
such
fucking
a
crazy.
Yeah, and we weren't allowed to work from home. That was not, our computers were desktop computers. They were not laptops.
Yeah.
So you had to go into the office to do.
I cannot. I was like, why are we doing this?
Yeah, I can't, just thinking about the desktops now, I was like, we really lived like that.
Oh my god.
It's so strange. I think one final question we could ask is like skill sets that people should invest in if they want to work in editorial. Any advice you would have for people who want to work in editorial?
Okay. I think it would be two-pronged. I think you need really thick skin. You need really thick skin. You need to be able to hear over and over again, prove yourself. Because that's what the editorial space is like. It's like they are constantly testing you in ways, and you could have all of the ability to see the potential in projects, to be detail-oriented, to understand narrative and structure and development, to be deeply emotionally invested in stories. You can have all of those things, and yet you're still proving yourself and your value all the time. So I would say you need really thick skin, aside from all of the things I just mentioned. I think you need patience. We shouldn't need patience, but you need like an infinite amount of patience because growth in these jobs is very limited. You need another source of income. You need to be able to pay your bills through something else, or you need some kind of financial support like I had with my dad, because these jobs don't pay what they need to for you to do them sustainably. And I think like the